Alright my captains, so today we have some massive news about both the story, game modes and interface of part 2 of the Honkai Impact 3rd story, which we are going to talk about, and let me know your opinion about them in the comments section below. Now before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like and share to support the channel, and without any further ado, let's just get started. So first of all, let's talk about the story. So the main story of part 2 is connected to the present story, so basically the story of part 1 and 1.5. However, in the future of part 2 we might be actually meeting with familiar faces, meaning that we are going, as I said before, to meet actually characters from part 1. The story of part 2 takes place after part 1.5 but before a post-Honkai Odyssey, as I explained in one of my videos. I am going actually to leave the link to this video in the description below because it explains the entire timeline events of Honkai Impact 3rd, starting from the previous era and going on until the post-Honkai Odyssey part 2. So if you are interested in seeing how the timeline of events in Honkai Impact 3rd is, you can go to that link and watch that video. Now previously the story was on Earth, Moon and in some bubble universes. However, this time we are going to expand a little bit and we are going to start first on Mars, and then we are going to expand even more and we are going to go to the entire solar system, and the story is going to continue the story of part 1. However, it is going to begin basically from a new start point, and it will give us a new perspective on the story. As I explained in my previous video, some of the new characters in part 2 are going to be related to the existing characters in part 1. Coralie, for example, is adopted by Dr. Einstein, and she is basically a non-staff member of Anti-Entropy. Helia is a Chixel A rank Valkyrie, and her idol is Durandal. Obviously, any Valkyrie from Chixel is going to have Durandal as her idol. It's just something that must happen. They together with Dreamseeker and Sinadina will be the protagonists of the new story and lead us to explore Mars. As the adventure progresses, we will also meet familiar faces. So as I said before, we are going to see the characters from part 1 appearing in part 2, but first they need to establish the story of part 2. They need basically to build up part 2. They need to explain who the characters of part 2 are, and then after they are done with that, they are going to start slowly but surely giving us more and more of the characters of part 1 and showing them in part 2. However, this is what we know right now about the story of part 2 of Honkai Impact 3rd. So let's go now to the game modes. Now in the game modes we have basically the same modes that we had are going to stay in the game. Part 2 update will start from version 7.3 and it will start from the main story and gradually expand. Beside that, existing systems and gameplay such as Abyss, Memorial Arena and Elysian Realm will stay in the game and will be updated normally, and captains can still use both the existing characters, meaning the characters that we get from part 1 and 1.5, and the new characters after the part 2 update. So you can still use both the characters of part 1 and 1.5 and the characters of part 2 in basically both the Abyss, Memorial Arena and Elysian Realm, and these modes are going to stay in the game, and you are going to be able to obtain crystals and other materials from them. However, the main story part 2 will have restrictions on the use of characters, obviously, just like how the main story of part 1 is. Sometimes they force you to use a certain character, but that certain character is given to you as a trial card, and if you want, if you have the same character summoned for it, and you got its weapon and stigmatas and all of that stuff, and you want to use your own character, you can also change to that character as well. But if you don't have the character, you don't need to worry. They are going to give you that character as a trial card or character that you can use basically during the story chapter and finish that chapter. So you can either choose to use your own character if you summoned for that character, or use the trial character if you didn't summon for that character. Now, that's what we know about the game modes, and most likely they are going to come up with new game modes as well for part 2 specifically, because all they talked about right now was from part 1 and they said that they will stay. However, I think that we are most likely going to get some new game modes as well for part 2, but maybe that is going to take a little while, and that's why they didn't want to talk about it right now. Instead, they wanted to optimize what they have, and then they give us basically the best ideas that they came up with. Now let's talk about the interface. So when it comes to the interface, when captains are in part 2, the bridge scene will change. However, you will be able to change the bridge scene to the one from part 1 as well, in case you like that more. So basically you will have the choice between choosing either the new bridge scene that you got from part 2, or keeping the old bridge scene that we have in part 1. Some stuff that are going to be different, they will look a little bit different because of the fact that they are going to optimize the resolution and the graphics and all of that in the part 2 one. So basically you are going to have to pick between these two, but you have the choice, as I said before, to pick whether you want the one from part 1 or the one from part 2. And I know that this is going to make many people happy, because one of these things that people were criticizing was actually the fact that they got rid of the bridge scene. But it seems that they didn't. It's just people coming up to conclusions way too fast as usual, and basically spreading misinformation. They didn't get rid of the bridge scene. Instead, they gave you 2 bridge scenes that you can actually pick between, and they aren't going to make it like Star Rail as people were saying. No, you aren't going to be in an open world where you don't even have any bridge scene, but instead you are going to stay in a bridge scene. Whether you pick actually part 1 or part 2, both of them are going to have a bridge scene. They are going to be different from each other, but they are both bridge scenes. They aren't going to be in an open world like Honkai Star Rail. The bridge interactions and voices of characters in part 2 are going to be available in both modes, so you don't need to worry about the fact that maybe you have characters from part 2 that you summoned for, and you have the background or the bridge scene of part 1. You don't need to worry about whether they will have their interactions and voices there or not. They will have them, so you don't need to even care about that. You just need to pick the bridge scene that you like the most, whether it is basically from part 1 or part 2. Now, beside the main interface, Valkyrie interface, formation and attack interfaces have been adjusted and optimized as much as possible, and we are going to see actually these interfaces already implemented in version 7.1. So you can see that they are already trying to build up the story or basically the optimization of part 2, and I don't think that we are going to see actually the bridge scene of part 2 yet, because as they said that it will change to that once we enter part 2. so that isn't going to happen right now, but they are trying to optimize the resolutions and the graphics so that they can actually just implement that directly without any problems. So they are trying to implement it step by step so that they won't give us some massive update immediately like that and basically surprise us with it, but instead step by step is going to be much better for us and for them as well. Now this is all the information that we have. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, like and share to support the channel, and until next time, Rami the Honkai King is out of here.